The idea that Foolio might die made his killers shudder. They are said to have apologized.
We shouldn't have did that. We shouldn't have traveled all the way to Jacksonville to Tampa to go kill Foolio.
That was only the beginning, though. They surrendered everything to investigators, including their methods of doing the shooting.
He puts out his arms like this, and it appears that he's brandishing a rifle.
And in the midst of it all, they mentioned a well-known rapper. It really did get explosive. Allow me to explain. The streets and the courthouse came together for a ferocious manhunt after Foolio's murder. All around Florida, law enforcement organizations were putting in endless effort to find and apprehend the suspects. Moreover, when those, it was like watching dominoes fall one by one as the arrests finally began to come in. Isaiah Chance, 21, Alicia Andrews, 21, and Sean Gathite, 18, were arrested in Jacksonville on July 27, 2024. However, the story didn't stop there. The 30-year-old Rashad Murphy was apprehended on July 29, 2024, during a standoff. And the 27-year-old last suspect, Dave Murphy, wasn't taken into custody until December 6, 2025, after months of hiding. This is where things become very weird in this story. Even seasoned detectives were shocked by the things these suspects began doing when they were brought in for questioning. Allow me to describe the events that transpired in that room during Davon Murphy's interrogation.
He puts out his arms like this, and it appears that he's brandishing a rifle with one hand extended and one, what I would consider the trigger finger. He starts walking around the interview room after he gets out of his seat, and this is after Detective Nieder and I left, and he's holding it like this in front of him, and then he starts going, "Bow, bow, 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 bow." And then he walks around, and then he does it again, and he does it multiple times.
During the interrogation, this man actually got up and started to demonstrate, complete with sound effects, how he shot Foolio. This moron thought it would be a good idea to act out a murder, even though the cameras were still recording after the detectives had left the room. The streets had never witnessed such self-incriminating evidence. It gets worse for these suspects. Though, Isaiah Chance was questioned by the police, and it was clear how they felt about Foolio.
What do you know about Foolio? Let's start from there. I think he's a piece of I watched all those videos. I went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, we all did.
I mean, that Joker's desecrating graves. He is asking to be killed. There's no doubt about it.
It was inevitable.
I can't believe it took this many years for somebody to kill him. Honest to God.
Even police enforcement acknowledged the dangerous game. Foolio was playing with his life, which may shock some, but it also shows how intense the gang rivalry was. The detectives were not defending the murder, but they were acknowledging the reality of Foolio's decision to live on the streets. The one that these suspects have a lot of evidence against them. Video from the scene was used by investigators. 2 vehicles were located and linked to the defendant using phone logs and license plate readers. However, this is the worst part. As they looked in Sean Gathite's car, they found ammo that matched rounds from Foolio's shooting 2 years prior. Think for a second about that. The evidence of a previous attempt on Foolio's life had been carried around by this individual for years. As one commenter put it,
"You mean to tell me that he couldn't even go clean his car?"
So the rounds that he allegedly used to shoot Foolio 2 years before was still in his car.
Man,
so in 2 years, I guess he's never cleaned out the car because the rounds were still in the car.
These suspects' level of carelessness was simply amazing. Even though they were leaving evidence everywhere they went, they thought they were above reproach. Law enforcement in Jacksonville and Tampa took note of the arrest's announcement.
For all the victims, including the mother of Charles Jones, who traveled from Jacksonville this morning to be present for this announcement. Today I stand before Tampa Police Major Pat Messmer, Jacksonville Sheriff T.K. Waters, and Hillsborough State Attorney Susie Lopez to announce the arrest of 3 people in the deadly shooting of Charles Jones, also known by his stage name of Foolio. In addition, we have warrants and are actively searching for 2 other individuals in this case.
the 5 defendants were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, and they might all be sentenced to life in prison or even the capital penalty. The defendants' extensive cooperation showed that this was not an unplanned act of violence, but rather a well-planned execution. The roles played by each suspect started to surface as a consequence of the investigation. Foolio was discovered to have been trailed about Tampa by lookouts Alicia Andrews and Isaiah Chance, including at Teaser's Gentlemen's Club and Truth 18 nightclub. Sean Gathright, Rashad Murphy, and Davon Murphy were alleged to be the actual shooters in the interim. But this is also where the story takes another unexpected turn. These connections were far deeper than anyone had initially believed, according to the investigation. Isaiah Chance allegedly collected $390 from Jay, according to court documents. In June, the 1200 Gangs member, the rapper Breezy, was contacted through Cash App, which was utilized to book an Airbnb on 22nd, 2024. Jay, do it. Although Breezy has not yet been charged, the homicidal scheme might have been aided by this cash. The street politics at play were evident from the accused gang affiliations. Murphy and Rashad, although he was listed as a member of the ATK gang, Isaiah Chance was connected to 1200. These were not your average criminals. The fight they served in had been ongoing for many years. It destroyed the surveillance footage used by the prosecutors.
Surveillance video was critical in this investigation, as suspects were seen on video following Jones from location to location. This shows the lengths that these individuals were willing to go through and achieve that this murder would occur. At 4:15 in the morning, Jones began to head to a hotel on McKinley. One of the suspect vehicles is seen following the victim. However, instead of following them into a parking lot, they stage across the street.
Seeing the real moment of the murder captured on camera was devastating when the prosecutors played the video in court.
This is at the hotel, and you can see the shooters are getting in position for their planned out murder. And they are shooting at Charles now, and you can see that he's the passenger in that car that's moving and trying to flee. And again, they're still shooting at him. He's the right front passenger in that vehicle.
Bond hearings for these defendants were contentious events. Since judges recognized the gravity of the charges and the danger these individuals posed to the public, they declined to post bail for any of the suspects. Davon Murphy's bond hearing was eventually scheduled in January 2025, and the denial was swift and final. Perhaps the most telling moment, however, came when details about the suspects' personal lives started to come to light. The revelation of Alicia Andrews' pregnancy significantly changed the course of her case. This discovery is crucial for what happened next, because being pregnant while in the county jail on murder charges has a different set of incentives and pressures. The examination also revealed how extensive the planning was. The murderous scheme against Jones was hatched between June 21st and June 23rd. On June 22, 2024, suspects were seen driving to vehicles from Jacksonville to Tampa. This crime wasn't particularly impassioned. The operation was carried out militarily and included a number of moving parts. Social media was also very important to the case. Foolio posted on social media. He provided his attackers with a roadmap to follow by posting his location on social media several times during that night. The digital era has made it easier for predators to track their prey than ever before. It had a significant impact on the neighborhood. Sheriff T.K. Waters stated unequivocally that Florida will not tolerate this level of brutality.
In closing, I want to directly speak to those who choose violence and those who embrace a culture that glorifies violence. Florida, Tampa, JSO, Jacksonville, Miami, wherever you are, will not tolerate foolishness. will not tolerate shootings and needless violence.
The prosecution was as determined to speak. Susie Lopez, the state attorney, stated unequivocally that everyone will be affected.
The feud stops here. All 5 of these defendants are facing life in the Florida State Prison, even the ones who didn't pull the trigger. In Florida, if you participate in the planning of a murder, you can be held accountable for the person's death. And that is what we intend to do here.
As the case developed, it was clear that the prosecution had put together a strong case against all 5 of the defendants. The preparation was undeniable, the evidence was overwhelming, and the crime was executed on many cameras. These young people would live with the consequences of their decisions for the rest of their lives. Let me explain their decision and eventual demise. Here, after that night, everything changed. First, let's set the scene. Jacksonville has struggled with a brutal gang war for over a decade. At the heart of it all was Charles Andrew Jones III, better known to the world as Julio Foolio. This little brother was not just any rapper. He represented the 6-block gang of the KTA network, and he was in the middle of the streets. It stands for Kill Them All. I promise you, the name wasn't just for show. From the start, Julio's life was marked by violence. His own killing resulted from a violent cycle of retaliation that began in 2011 when his father, Charles Andrew Jones, was shot dead in Jacksonville. Growing up in the Mon Creek neighborhood, Fio wasn't only making music with a street vibe. The streets belonged to him. Resurrection, Final Destination, and Life of Me were among his albums that were more than just artistic creations. Real street combat was the subject of the documentaries. Foolio's death was the result of a quarrel that started after his 18-year-old cousin, Zion Malik Brown, was shot and killed in 2017, an episode that heightened the gang war to fatal quantities. This went beyond a simple rap battle over social media dominance. 6 Block was in real battle with its rivals, the top killers in ACATK and 1200 out east. There had been multiple attempts on Fio's life before that fatal night. In July 2020, he was shot in Houston, Texas, and suffered injuries. He was also shot in the foot in October 2023 while driving in Jacksonville. However, the adolescent artist had no plans to give up. He said he retaliated in self-defense during the Houston incident, being open about the street rule he lived by. This time, the celebration was scheduled for June 23, 2024. Fio was spending his 26th birthday in Tampa, Florida, was excited to enjoy himself. But there were various thoughts in the streets. The thing happened. He and his group were ordered to vacate the Airbnb at around 4:40 a.m. for exceeding occupancy limits. The scenario that followed was from a movie, yet this was not Hollywood. There were real consequences since this was real life. There were 3 attackers using a handgun that had a high-capacity magazine that could shoot over 30 bullets, and 2 rifles that caught brass began to fire. Amazingly, none of the 3 victims who were injured in the brutal attack lost their lives. But this is the point at which things get really difficult. This feud was not impromptu or accidental. The Tampa Police Department released security tape showing individuals following Fio before the death, proving this was a deliberate, planned hit. These guys were not enjoying themselves. They trailed him like hunters after their prey. The driver, a survivor of Fio's car, gave a heartbreaking account of those final moments.
I heard him take his last, bro. We got to the hotel, he went in, checked in, and they told him that the rooms had already been taken. So he came back to the car. He was on his phone trying to find a hotel. I'm just on point watching everything. Looked down at my phone for like a split second. And then something just like ain't feel right. So as soon as I look up, I just see shooters. I just kept telling him to duck. I ain't really hear him say really, because the gunfire was so loud. So it was just like I ain't really hear him say nothing. I already knew when I stopped the car, you feel me, because he wasn't responding. I heard him take his last, bro.
that testimony evokes a distinct emotion. Imagine being there as your friend draws his last breath, bullets flying all around you. The survivor's voice is so full of unfiltered emotion that it shows how real this tragedy was. Tampa Police Commander Lee Burkhoff made it clear that goal was rival gang retaliation. Members, as part of the continuing battle with 6 Block, specifically ATK and 1200. This extended beyond music and messages on social media. During this 10-year struggle, scores of murders had already occurred. The inquiry that followed was just astounding, using law enforcement all the information required to put together exactly what happened that evening, including CCTV footage and mobile tower data. Court documents that depict a well-planned strategy based on a gang disagreement contain surveillance footage, cell phone data, and physical evidence like rifle casings that connect the accused to the crime. Here's what's even stranger about this circumstance. The one that the suspects were not some experienced criminals who were skilled at concealing their identity. A string of mistakes made by these young men would eventually lead to a trail of evidence that would implicate them. How reckless they were in their unlawful acts is demonstrated by the fact that one suspect had shot rounds from a previous attempt on Foolio's life 2 years earlier in his car. The one that quick and powerful was the community's response. Conjecture, condolences, and comments were all over social media. What really attracted attention, though, were posts that speculated that Fio might have staged his death based on dubious actions on his Instagram. Official reports, however, including his July 6, 2024 burial at Edgewood Cemetery, confirmed his death and discredited such conspiracy theories. It had a catastrophic impact on the rap scene in Jacksonville. The actual violence that killed one of the city's biggest stars abruptly overshadowed the music that had made the place renowned, with one social media reviewer saying, "With their actions, these suspects had effectively destroyed the Jacksonville drill scene." Not that the police were having any fun. No. Tampa Police Chief Lee Burkhoff and Sheriff TK Waters both emphasized how strongly they oppose gang-related violence, with Burkhoff stating that Tampa was not the right place to settle disputes. It was a loud, unambiguous statement. Carrying that street beef into their city would have put you under the full force of the law. Already, there were whispers in the streets, and the investigation was only beginning. Rumors circulated that arrests were about to take place, and when they did, the information that emerged would surprise everyone. It was the perfect hit, the suspects thought. But they didn't know that everything they did had been monitored. Every discussion they had and every mistake they made was recorded by investigators working on a strong case. This was not only a case of solving one murder. All Florida gang members were to be made aware that the use of firearms to resolve conflicts was no longer an option. The government was ready to search for the greatest penalty. And as we'll see in the next section, when those arrests finally came down, the suspects' responses would demonstrate how unprepared they were for the consequences of their acts. In one of the most dramatic court cases in recent history, street norms would conflict with legal ramifications, revealing the truth about what had happened that night. Finally, it would be exposed, but there was still the biggest surprise to come, as the pressure mounted and the reality of their situation emerged. Some of these individuals began to crack under the weight of the prospect of being put to death. And when they did, the material that came to light would expose the entire system of violence and not just the details of Foolio's murder. For years, Jacksonville had struggled with retaliation. The death sentence changes all of it. It was startling that the state filed motions for the death penalty for Isaiah Chance, Sean Gathright, and Rashad Murphy, but not for Alicia Andrews. It would turn out that this decision was the pivotal moment that led to the collapse of everything. According to these suspects, they knew loyalty and street codes.
The prosecuting attorney down there in Tampa, Florida, has filed a motion seeking the death penalty. Yeah. The death penalty. That boy Rashad Murphy, death penalty. Gathright, death penalty. What's the other boy named? Chance, Guttazay, death penalty. It's over with. The only person that's not getting the death penalty, the only person that the prosecuting attorney has hasn't filed a motion seeking the death penalty, and that's for Alicia.
Alicia Andrews was spared the death penalty. But why was everyone else? The response is dependent on several factors that are critical to understanding how this situation developed. According to street experts, Andrews had compelling reasons to cooperate with law enforcement once her pregnancy was revealed.
When that girl came out and said she was pregnant, dude, you in the county jail under a murder charge and you pregnant? Y'all, that right there gave her all the incentives in the world to say, hey, you know what, look, I need to tell y'all the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The pressure Andrews was under was unlike anything the male suspects had ever experienced. Victim advocacy groups were contacting her, family members were listening to her, and she faced the possibility of giving birth while confined and running the chance of dying there. As per one hood analyst,
do y'all understand how many victim advocate programs been contacting her, trying to talk to her and saying, hey, you know you got a baby, do you want to give your baby up for adoption? Hey, you got a baby, you need to think about your baby. You can't just go to jail like these guys right here. You got a child to think about, you got to raise the child.
However, this is where things start to get interesting. She had started to talk, though Andrews had no idea how damaging her words were.
See, now, one thing we gotta realize is that she already done did some snitching with, some of us, you might just say, well, yeah, she might have did a little slip of the tongue, or she wasn't thinking right and all that. But when you break it all down, it's like she already done did the snitching, though. She already done put them at the scene of the murder crime.
The study suggests that Andrews may have been more forthcoming with investigators than she should have been from a street perspective because she was initially unaware of how serious the situation was.
I don't think that she really understood the gravity of what was going on. And that's why when they sat her down to talk about what had happened, she had no problem with, just telling them the truth. Yeah, that's us. When they showed her the video footage, yeah, that's us right there. We driving past the hotel room. Yeah, that's us right there. We doing this, we doing.
While Feo's passing did not stop the violence in Jacksonville. The series of events that followed would reveal the scope and ongoing character of this gang war. On January 24, 2025, Bray and 7-year-old Dusk Allen Jr. was fatally wounded, and his cousin was shot and killed in a shootout related to the ATK and 6 Block fight. This horrific incident showed how far the cycle of violence had spread. The shooting started because of a rap song that insulted 6 Block and made reference to Foolio, proving that even after his death, some continued to use Feo's name to call for further violence. But to get back to the main case, the pronouncements about the death sentence created a completely new dynamic in the county jail where these suspects were being held.
Now, another thing we got to understand is this right here. Being that the prosecution is seeking the death penalty, they got bargain chips now. Yeah, all them other participants that's laying in the weeds, acting like they ain't did nothing and all that old type of stuff, they scared the right.
The threat that they might be executed started to weigh heavily on these suspects, as per one street analyst.
It's different. It's way different when you just facing a murder charge. You think to yourself, you know what? Dang, I gotta go through life. I can do my time, but at least I'm still alive. I can go see my family. You still got life. But death row ain't like that. Totally different world. And not only that, they trying to kill you. So there's a difference.
The prosecution's approach was becoming clear. Employ the death penalty as leverage to persuade these people to reveal all details of the broader scheme. There was already a ton of evidence against each suspect. The prosecution had security footage, mobile tower data, text messages, and physical proof. The method resulted in what experts called a slam dunk case. One particularly damaging piece of evidence was a boastful text message made by Rashad Murphy following the murder. "I am going home. I can now drink without thirst. Get a bottle of Don Julio today, Murphy," showing that not only his involvement in the crime, but his satisfaction in it. Neighborhood watched for Andrews to ultimately testify and provide a detailed explanation of what had happened. But the crime was not committed by just these 5 suspects. It was thought that the investigation would reveal a wider network of beneficial plan, provide funding for bread, or support the murder. There were still questions about whether additional rappers or gang members were involved in the scheme, as well as Breezy's alleged $390 payment to Isaiah Chance. As the case progresses, Andrews' trial and that of Gathright, Chance, and Rashad Murphy are tentatively scheduled for August 2025 and April 2026, respectively. But there was a lot of speculation on the street that if suspects started banding together to avoid being put to death, these cases might never get to trial. The message conveyed by the larger message was clear. The days of resolving disputes with violence were over, at least in terms of getting away with it. It was one of the most important lessons from this case that even snitches don't get away with it.
Snitches go to prison. Somebody better tell y'all something. Snitches don't just get out of jail and stuff like that. Unless, dealing with drugs and stuff like that, yeah, you might get that because, somebody dealing with property, drugs, or you get caught with a gun, then you can say, let me go work for you and stuff like that. Then you might, but when you commit a crime against a person, murder, aggravated robbery and all that, you can do all the snitching you want. Your ass is still going to jail.
At the end of this story, we still don't know what will happen to these 5 suspects. But it's clearly clear that their decision to kill Foolio has destroyed not just their own lives, but also the lives of several friends and family members who will be negatively impacted. Despite the possibility of a street-specific code of justice, that the legal system is in conflict with code because it does not adhere to street regulations. The ultimate punishment is the possibility of execution, and the thought of it has fundamentally changed how these young suspects view their cases. Should Andrews ultimately testify against her co-defendants, the males? Whether suspects will come forward with details about the bigger plan and whether justice will be served for Foolio and his family. The answers to these questions will come in the next months and years. Nonetheless, this incident has undoubtedly stunned the hip-hop scene and served as a somber reminder that the exaltation of street, the effects of musical violence can extend well beyond the recording studio and into the real world. These 5 offenders were arrested, but the cycle of violence that killed Foolio continues to haunt communities across America. Until that pattern is broken, the false belief that violence can solve problems will result in more young lives being lost, more families being broken apart, and more promising futures being ruined. As usual, it is up to each individual to decide. You have 2 options. Either continue down the violent path and face the repercussions, or change your mind and build a life that doesn't end in a courtroom with a death penalty hanging over you. Foolio made the decision too late. These 5 suspects' consequences. We are only beginning to make decisions. And to everyone watching this disaster play out, the message is clear. Ultimately, the streets are always defeated. Thank you for watching. Check out the rest of our videos on the screen for more stimulating content.